Thanks everyone for joining us again. We're talking with Mike Moffatt of the Missing Middle Initiative on a report that dives into the figures behind housing affordability in Ottawa. Mike, you've also translated these into the percentage of total pre-tax income in Ottawa that people would need for mortgage payments. What's your assessment of housing affordability in Ottawa today, and how does that really kind of compare to the rest of the province?
Yeah, so we're middle of the pack, and again, for a median income family, which is about $115,000 right now, they're probably at the point where they're not going to qualify for a mortgage, simply because those monthly mortgage payments, once you include property taxes or whatever, end up being above 38%, which is typically the threshold at which banks start to get nervous, and you have all of those federal rules in place. So yeah, we are quite expensive here in Ottawa, at least for a median income family. We are less expensive than the GTA. It used broadly, so not just the City of Toronto, but York Region, Peel Region, even going down through Burlington and Hamilton. But there are pockets of Southern Ontario that are less expensive. Windsor, Sarnia, Chatham, Kent, and then here in Eastern Ontario, obviously Kingston and Peterborough. The one thing Ottawa does have going for it is, we tend to have a stronger labor market than those places. But overall, if you have a couple that has, kind of a median income jobs, right? So you might have, a nurse married to a bookkeeper or something like that. They're going to have a really tough time qualifying for a mortgage. And those are the kind of young middle class families and the kind of young middle class jobs that we need to have this city function.
So finally, at the end of the report, you kind of provide an overall WHAM affordability score for the spots that you've mentioned, but of course, specifically for Ottawa, it kind of jumps from a 157 in January 05 to a 255 in December 2024. I've kind of asked this question again, but similar phenomenons across the province.
Yeah, similar phenomena across the province. And again, 250 is our number for. Above that, you're probably not qualifying for a mortgage. So, we're going to have to see, wages go up or some relief on prices to get back to middle class affordability. We have another report that actually just came out very, very recently that kind of builds on this. So what we did is we looked at current home prices and said, okay, if we just hold those constant and let wages increase like they have over the last 20 years, which has been about 3% a year, how long would it take us to return to affordability here in Ottawa? And what we found is it's about 16 and a half years. So we're going to have to sort of figure out how to get more housing supply. Like, we can't just kind of inflate our way out of it through wage growth.
And I'm glad you kind of mentioned that, because one of the nice things about Missing Middle Initiative's reports is they kind of feed into each other, or they kind of relate to each other. And when I saw kind of the 255 score, it immediately made me think of a previous report that you guys have done on sort of the exodus of families from Ottawa into kind of those neighboring communities, and because of this kind of affordability. Can you dive into that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So since about 2016 or so, we've seen a big increase in the number of families moving out to communities like Carleton Place and Arnprior and Perth. And what we just got, it's somewhat bimodal of who's moving out there. So you have, and we saw this, and to be clear, we saw this happening before the pandemic. Obviously during the pandemic, you had people working remotely that give them a little bit more options, but this phenomenon predates the pandemic by a few years. And if you break down who's moving by age, it's really two cohorts. The first are what I call late career professionals. So it's people my age or a little bit older. You can imagine, perhaps they work for the federal government in an executive role, and they're making good money, and they decide, you know what, I don't want to live in the glebe anymore. I want a little bit more space. So I'm gonna go out somewhere to Lanark and get that larger home with maybe a half acre or an acre, and be closer to nature. The other group that you're seeing is young families. And this is people between like the ages of 28 and 35 or so, either just about to have a kid or maybe, have a 2 or 3 year old. And for them, they're mostly looking, they're looking for good neighborhoods, but they're also just looking for space. You can imagine a couple living in a condo or apartment in downtown Ottawa, and they have a kid or two, and they go, okay, this just ain't going to work. But they've been priced out of the city. So they're going to other communities, perhaps buying a townhome that they can afford, again, along with good schools, good quality of life, and so on. So it's really bimodal who's moving out there, but it's a relatively recent phenomenon. Up until about 2015, the number of people who would move out of those communities to Ottawa and go the other direction was essentially a wash. Like, people would kind of move back and forth in equal amounts. Now what we're seeing is lots of families moving out to these communities, but as well, a lot of families moving to those communities from the GTA. So you might see, again, you might have somebody who works in the GTA, gets a job with the federal government, or gets some kind of federal government related job, and so on, thinks about moving to the city, looks at home prices and so on, goes, you know what, I can actually do better if I move to a Carleton Place or a Perth or an Arnprior or so on. So you are seeing that. So it is, when we look at these prices, it's not just about what people are paying, but we also want to look at, okay, how is it changing the decisions that families are making?
Yeah, and those kind of two time frames just overlap unbelievably well, and correlation or causation, I guess, but it's interesting to kind of watch that and how that also affects kind of planning at the City of Ottawa in terms of housing accommodation and planning for housing growth moving forward as well. But that's a topic for another day. So I wanted to wrap up a discussion on a bit of, okay, now what? There's always, I think, in the past number of years has been consensus of, yes, there's a housing affordability problem. I think this report really shows kind of, here's the empirical evidence of that, of the decrease in affordability, but then also the magnitudes of how much more expensive it is to get into housing at this point, and compared to what it was, say, 10 years ago. But less of a who do we blame for this, but sort of a, okay, we're in this position now. What do we do? How do we move forward out of this? And that's kind of the thing I'd really like to hear your thoughts on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we don't touch on this report, but as you see, we've had so many other reports, so it's easy for us to talk to. I think the big thing is we need to get the cost of these homes down to a point that young middle class families can afford. It's at the end of the day, it's a cost of delivery issue. So that's looking at costs like development charges. Those are a big issue. You would have a better idea than I would, but I know they've gone up a number of times just the last 18 months or so in Ottawa, and that cost differential between Ottawa and other communities in Eastern Ontario does affect those migration patterns. Then it comes down to land use issues of being able to build missing middle housing. I have to sort of plug our institute there, but in general, whether it be on greenfields or infill, being able to build houses for families, that overall a lot of how we're getting increasing unit counts oftentimes comes from one bedroom or studio suite apartments. And I'm not suggesting we don't need those. We do need those, but we need a spectrum of housing, and we can't kind of over focus on just one type. And it really is that 3-bedroom starter home. It could be single detached, semi-detached townhouse. The form itself isn't so much the issue, but it's just having enough space for kids. So at the municipal level, again, that's development charges and zoning and land use, and having these difficult conversations about urban growth boundaries and things like that, which we could save for another time. On the provincial level, I think we have to look at things like the PST. I think we need to look at building code, particularly for small apartments. It can be challenging building 3-bedroom plus units because of a variety of clauses in the building codes. I think we need to look at single egress stairways. And then at the federal level, GST is obviously a big one. The federal government is also looking at ways to incentivize municipalities to lower development charges or make other changes, as we've seen in the housing accelerator. I like in theory what they're doing there. I think it needs a little bit more work, but I think it's the right idea. So it's going to take all three orders of government. That no one government is going to solve this for us. We need the city of Ottawa, the province of Ontario, and the federal government all to be rowing in the same direction.
Mike, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us today. If people want to get more information about Missing Middle Initiative or dive into those reports, the multitude of reports that we've kind of referenced today, where do they go?
Yeah, so you can go to the missingmiddleinitiative.ca. You can see our reports. We also have a podcast that's available on YouTube, Spotify. So we have a video version, audio version. But you can also find that on missingmiddleinitiative.ca. We post episodes every Wednesday morning. So come check it out. You can see the reports, see the podcasts, and just have a great conversation about what's been happening, not just to housing, but Canada's middle class in general.
So thanks again, Mike, for joining us. I'm really looking forward to the next conversation and dive into some more of the things we got to tease out today. Once again, I'm Jason Burggraaf. Thanks for joining us. Visit goba.ca for more information on housing policies and new home stats.